You are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup, coming to you live from the AIEA conference in Washington, D.C. Wrapping up the conference today after 3 days of meetings and events. Really enjoying this first time coming as an institutional participant, having been here previously as a representative for Education USA as well as another service provider. It's good to be in the sessions, connecting with colleagues at other institutions that are sharing similar challenges and opportunities that they're facing on their campuses related to international issues. Good to have, I think we have just under 800 registrants and participants in the conference this year, and good to see so many institutions coming from abroad to connect with us in the United States. Have had some institutional connections here in Mexico, in Ecuador, in Canada, in France, in South Africa. There's been delegations here from that the State Department has arranged from the ASEAN region, from the Maldives, from other very large delegation from Angola, and very happy to be connecting with them during this conference. So we've had some very interesting topics of discussion. A lot of the sessions have surrounded topics of DEI, access, inclusion, all of those wonderful pieces of higher education acronym soup that we've been adding into our language in the last few years, but certainly those are front and center here at AIEA, and how we're providing access to certain student groups that haven't had opportunities to engage in study abroad, for example, through internationalizing the curriculum and what the implications are in intersectionalities, as we talk about here, intersections between what DI typically is meant on U.S. colleges and universities, as well as the intersection of where international connects with that, and how, frankly, as we've talked about here on the Roundup before, how interconnected those two are, and how perhaps they aren't always aligned on our college campuses, and certainly many sessions this week focused on how that can happen. It's also been refreshing to hear from colleagues in other countries how they are dealing with the challenges with inclusion and access, particularly from the public university side. We've had folks from Brazil that have been intimately involved with FOBI in Brazil at the public universities, and talking about their actual policies and regulations that require to provide free education to certain groups, and have very defined quota systems that they have to accommodate for indigenous and other minority communities in their countries, and how one country defines it is not always the same as how others define it, and have different challenges, different groups that they're trying to bring into the mix. So it's been very interesting to hear all the different challenges that they're facing, particularly coming out of the pandemic, and hearing stories, particularly from our colleagues in Brazil, how on the public university side, where they had anything from 90% up to 90% of their budgets cut during the pandemic, mostly from the Bolsonaro government, significant cuts over the years. So it's really been an interesting challenge watching them kind of rejoice, if you will, with the re-election of President Lula to power recently, and celebrating that as a real sea change in Brazilian society, and in terms of their ability to operate as universities. But so there's some really, really useful conversations that have been had here on some very relevant topics. We've also talked about the impact of China and global geopolitics on what we do. There have been sessions specifically about China, and how do we re-engage. Karen Fisher from the Chronicle has been featured on several panels over the last 3 days, and I'll be having the opportunity to present with her and for an ECE professional board development activity in the next month or so, next couple months. And it's interesting to hear her perspective, and Karen is as always. I mean, she gets accused of being a wet blanket at times on the golden age of U.S. higher international education. And certainly, I think there's a lot of positivity here at the conference related to that, and particularly coming out of the pandemic, and seeing budgets start beginning to be restored from cuts that we all experienced during the pandemic. We're certainly going to be feeling that hopefully at UNLV, where over the course of the pandemic, our institution lost $70 million as a result from state cuts where money had to be funneled elsewhere. So we're hoping to be made whole again, at least back to pre-pandemic levels with the legislative session coming up in June. But there are other universities who are getting some of that relief now and being more positive in terms of funding, in terms of their ability to reach out again in person to colleagues in other countries, to reopen study abroad programs that have been dormant for 3 years or so. So there's some real energy, and it contrasts fairly dramatically with some of the negative press we hear. And it's really, I won't say there's a disconnect, but certainly there's more positive energy driving us forward. And given past histories where post 9/11 there were opportunities that came about that ran counter to what might have normally been expected to re-engage with the Muslim world, and that was something that institutions were able to rise above the politics of the day, and to not only educate their local communities on campus about the value of interconnectedness in the world, and reaching out as institutions to those communities that, for lack of a better term, might have been looked down upon or shunned or even seen as enemies, whether that be Arab communities in the U.S., mosques in the United States, whatever it might be. That was a lesson we learned after 9/11, that we can't disengage. We have to re-engage, and that's really what international ed is all about. So a lot of the positivity, I think, comes from those practitioners that have been through the mill before and have come out on the other side and seen the value of really not losing focus on engaging with the world. And that is how we grow as people, when we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, to have those conversations that aren't always easy with colleagues and students in other countries. And there's a need for us as individuals to recognize as a country we have our flaws, as every country does. No one's perfect. And recognize that, being able to articulate that to students as we go to recruit them, to partners as we explain how our politics is, how we work with different groups on campus, and what the impacts of politics can and are on our campuses. The issue of gun violence comes up, and it regularly does. Anti-Asian hate has come up in sessions. But these are things are teachable moments, frankly. They are problems in our country, yes, no doubt about that. But they cannot be glossed over or sugar-coated in any way. But they should be addressed. And these are the realities of the world. The realities of life in the United States. We're in a polarized country. Nothing is an easy conversation nowadays, it seems. Even things, as we've found out, our Nevada institutions were just told yesterday that things like TikTok, WeChat can no longer be used on UNLV devices or any state-owned devices unless they're critical to our mission, our top-tier 2.0 mission-driven enterprises. They've even included Grammarly as a tool that we cannot use unless it's, again, critical to our mission as an institution. So it's interesting to see and the reasons for this as that they have been. We've talked about this on the Roundup related to TikTok. That certainly has been gotten on the majority of the press lately, as with security concerns about personal data that's used or collected through TikTok that is, for lack of a better term, not safe by U.S. security standards. So these are the conversations that are happening. I'm not sure how Grammarly gets on that list as in terms of security, personal data, and that type of thing. But certainly that's something I'll be looking into in the coming weeks. But you see, so much of that is coming out of politics. Some of it is real, very much real in terms of security concerns and in terms of data sharing. We don't want our data shared with the Chinese government because of the relationship with ByteDance and TikTok. In terms of where that goes, they have to. And if they're a Chinese company, they have to reveal certain data that the Chinese Communist Party wants them to reveal. They don't have a choice. So the separation is something the company certainly claims happens, and there is a wall between them. But this is the nature of the world we live in as it relates to politics and in terms of how that impacts what we do in higher ed, in international ed in particular. So we're not sure how all this will shake out yet in terms of we have 2 TikTok teams at UNLV, how that will work in terms of our ability to maintain outreach. Does it affect future vendor agreements that we might be looking to sign that might have WeChat or other Chinese social media components to it that we need to be able to reach students in that market, since we don't have physical travel happening there yet. So there's a lot of issues related to that bubble to the surface at conferences like this. And to be honest with you, this conference, AIEA, is meant for the senior international educators, officers on campus. And oftentimes there may be multiple representatives from a given college. Not all are SIOs, obviously. They bring folks in different colleges that are looking to do internationalization work. That might be on the study abroad side, that might be on internationalizing curriculum, maybe any number of different potential outlets for that involve multiple people from a given institution. But certainly the energy, I think, and the need to re-engage with our colleagues from abroad. Being in DC, this conference has really attracted, I think, perhaps more overseas university representatives to it than perhaps it would have been in New Orleans last year. And obviously we have NAFSA coming up here in May back in DC, so which will be probably 10 times as big, if not more, maybe 12 times as big as this, with expected over 10,000 participants there. So getting to see and hear from not only the other SIOs that are attending, what their issues are on their campuses, but also hearing from the associations. We yesterday had a reception at the Canadian Embassy, and part of that was co-sponsored by OUIE. That is the Organization for International Exchange in the Americas, Cooperation in the Americas. And David Julian, that I've gotten to know over the last year, is key to his organization puts on the CAIE conference, the Conference of the Americas for International Education, that will be happening for the first time in Las Vegas, first time in the United States, I should say, this coming November 6th to 8th, and we'll be having that in Las Vegas. Again, UNLV and other Nevada institutions are co-hosts for that event. We're going to be having the opening event on our campus in Las Vegas, so it's an opportunity for us to connect with institutions across the Americas, from Canada to Chile and everywhere in between. And there are a lot of different irons in the fire that lead up to that event coming in, and some fantastic conversations happened here, connecting with the Partners for the Americas, 100,000 Strong in the Americas organization that helps fund a lot of grants, funds grants to universities that are looking to cooperate on programming, whether it be COIL sessions, whether it be more intensive student exchange or degree programs, dual degree programs, those types of things. Those conversations are happening through Partners for the Americas, and also getting to connect with the State Department folks from the Western Hemisphere Bureau that are responsible for the kind of decisions related to grants that individual embassies hope to achieve. Going to be hearing fairly soon about one in particular that I might be involved in April, the end of April, in Ecuador, where helping Ecuadorian universities, 3 in particular, that are looking to internationalize and help them develop the kind of skill sets and toolkits to help them take the next steps with their colleges, and identifying the kinds of opportunities for study in Ecuador, partnerships with U.S. institutions and other countries We'll be doing things on recruitment, on exchanges, on internationalizing curriculum, faculty research, those types of things. That's just invaluable research, or valuable connections that are being reinforced to those participating universities. We're here at the conference as well, getting to connect them with the State Department folks making those decisions on grants and such, connecting them with the Partners for the Americas, 100,000 strong. So some real synergies happening here. Just before coming to sit down for this roundup, had the opportunity to chat with a colleague at University of Guanajuato in Mexico, someone whose colleagues I had met at the AMPE conference in Chiapas back in October, that are potentially leading to some cooperative agreements between our two institutions. That at that same conference we started talking about CAE. We had folks from two European institutions, as well as a colleague from South Africa that we may be partnering with as well. We were talking about the CAE conference in Las Vegas, and their ears perked up from France and from South Africa, and they are like, well, we might want to come to that too, because it's an opportunity for institutions who are looking to connect not only within the Americas to have an opportunity to form partnerships and agreements and those types of things, but also for universities in other parts of the world that might be looking to connect with universities in the Americas. So some fascinating synergies coming out of this in terms of potential for the future. Really energized, always am, for coming out of these conferences when there's those real conversations that are happening cross borders, cross cultures, and in other languages as well. Really fascinated to make the connections that we have been able to do this last 3 days. I mentioned some of the international delegations that State Department brought through. Because I've been in international ed now. It'll be 30 years this coming summer, and I've gotten to know so many fantastic educators across the world. Some in particular I've worked with through Education USA, worked with as colleagues on the higher ed side, and sometimes both. One of which has gone back, Rosie Edmonds, maybe familiar to those in the Ed USA world, connected with them. She used to be a REAC based in Japan. She is now back in the States and has been working as a program officer for South and Central Asia. She is a good friend and colleague. We used to live in the same town together when she was working at Ohio Northern, and I was at the University of Findlay for a bit. She Facebooked me right before one of the sessions that was related to these international delegations, and said, "Hey, you need to meet the Maldives delegation. They have someone from the Ministry of Education here. There's from their main institution, higher ed institution, and they want to think about a partnership with UNLV for hospitality." And she told her State Department colleague, who's based at the embassy in the Maldives, U.S. Embassy rep, you need to connect with Lance. And so I was able to do that from a Facebook message I got as I'm walking into this session. So it is a very small world, international education, and the building blocks of those relationships were formed 15 years ago when I got to know Rosie for the first time, when she was at American University College of Law. And those are the kinds of relationships that last, and they matter. They all matter. And as I was chatting with a new colleague from Guanajuato, I shared with him, hey, these are the relationships, the friendships that you build that start at these conferences that can last for decades. And it's really when you invest in the time and effort you need to in those relationships, that's when you really see the fruit. Not necessarily immediately, not huge volumes perhaps initially, but relationships that will help you do your job better and make the connections for your institution, for your organization that will last for hopefully many years to come. So lessons from this conference certainly is just the importance of the need for in-person events like this, where relationships can be re-energized, where new ones can be found that you weren't expecting, and several of those have happened this week. And it's certainly the kind of opportunities that we talk about in our profession, some by chance, some are by design, but these are the kinds of things that are necessary to really energize us to get where we need to be in our careers, for our institutions, to reach the levels that we know we can. And with the support in place through the resources you pick up through conferences like this, the folks that you know, I have a long list of people I need to follow up with in the coming days. Those are the things that it's not just the energy you get from these events like this. It's also taking that next step and follow through. And follow through means everything. You can have the best conversations ever, but if neither side or only one side follows up, then oftentimes that's where things break down. And sadly, that's just a reality of life. And international ed is no different than any other field. You can have a great conversation one day and then nothing ever comes of it. It's like all the MOUs that some institutions sign just for fun, just to say they have them, when the greater majority of them, nothing ever comes of them. So it really requires effort on both parties or multiple parties involved in any kind of agreements like these that might come out of this kind of an event. But it's one that for those, if you have two willing partners who are willing to put in the effort, you can really see some tremendous fruit grow, and that's hopefully for years to come. That's all we have for you today on the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. Thanks for being a part of the conversation. We look forward to chatting with you again next week. May 1st or March 1st that we'll be connecting with you next week. So looking forward to the conversations. Have a great day.